Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this very, very special edition of Freeform Friday on a Wednesday, because it is Wednesday, my dudes and dudettes. And it is a distinct honor and privilege for us to welcome to Freeform Friday the esteemed granddaughter of the late Montreal born, Ontario raised Soviet wrestling legend Ivan Koloff, the at last WWE Hall of Famer who thrilled fans around the world for decades and dethroned none other than Bruno Sammartino at New York's Madison Square Garden in 1971 to end Bruno's 8-year reign as World Heavyweight Champion when Bruno was thought to be unbeatable. Ladies and gentlemen, please say hello to the latest in the next generation of the capable Koloffs, the organizing mind behind the Koloff family reunion happening right now in a city near you. This is Melodie Koloff. Hello, Melodie, and welcome to Freeform Friday.
Hi, thank you for having me. That was quite an introduction. I really liked that one.
Right. And Alan, did you want to get us started?
Well, I'd be happy to get us started because I'm just feeling all the tingles and jingles of this incredible moment because I feel like my childhood, my teenage years all coming together, from Stalingrad to St. Petersburg, from the hallowed halls of the Kremlin to the secret files of the KGB. I grew up watching the Koloffs, and now to talk to like the future of the Koloff dynasty, I'm all a tingle. So this is a great honor and a privilege to have Melodie here, and thank you so much for being here. As you said, you're happy to be here. We're happy you're here. Big time.
Yep. Thank you guys for having me.
Pleasure.
So, my first question to you would be, when did you first realize that your grandfather was such a well-known, well-loved, and rather unique individual?
So I didn't fully realize it until well after he died, which is kind of a crazy thing most people are surprised to hear about. Um, I kind of use the analogy of if your dad works at an office, you don't realize he's the supervisor of the office. He just goes to work and does what he does. It's kind of the same way for me and my grandfather. I didn't realize the weight of what he did until well after he passed, and all these stories started rolling in, and then obviously the Hall of Fame. And I was like, I know he did something, but I didn't realize how much he did. So it was well after he died when I finally realized it.
Wow.
And how would you describe your early years, and what can you tell us about your immediate family?
My early years, I had an amazing childhood. My grandfather was my absolute best friend. Um, I come from a really tight knit family. My grandfather was definitely the glue that held us all together. My mom and my grandfather were really really close. My grandmother were all super close, and yeah, it was just I had a really normal childhood. He would make me breakfast in bed. We'd play with Barbies together. He'd read me Snow White bedtime books. Um, he was just my absolute best friend. I had the greatest childhood a girl could dream of.
Well, that's incredible, Melody, because I got to say, when I was 12 years old, your grandfather terrified me every week on time.
That
I was
that comes up
bedtime.
quite a bit to imagine the Russian bear with Barbie dolls when he used to terrify you.
It is, yeah. To compromise to sort of put the two images together. I used to want to hide when he came on the television screen when I was 12, and now to find out he was such a gentleman who played Barbies with his granddaughter, it's quite something.
Yep.
And where were you a pro wrestling fan as a child? And was it always on television in terms of your family watching it?
Yeah, I knew my grandfather was involved in wrestling. Obviously, you get packed in the car and you go to wrestling shows, and I loved watching it as a kid. Monday Night Raw was something frequently on our TVs growing up. Um, but I grew up watching it a little differently. I grew up with somebody critiquing every little tiny detail of it on the TV screen. I also really liked watching his VHS tapes. So that's how I learned a lot of wrestling, and a lot of the older guys were my grandfather's friends. And so I watched all the VHS tapes. I watched them backwards first. And me and my grandfather used to pick fun at how funny he would move in slow motion backwards and fast motion backwards. And he would be like, "Oh man, I look like a little bug. Get up, Koloff, get up, Koloff." So that was my introduction to wrestling, but it was always on.
Incredible.
Was Nikita Koloff portrayed to you as an uncle when you were very young?
Yes, I actually didn't see Uncle Nikita very often growing up. Um, I talked to him on the phone quite a lot. It was Nikki. Nikki was always on the phone. I met him once when I was growing up, and I actually didn't realize it was him. It was one of the few times that he had hair. And so my grandpa, he said, "Baby, that's Nikita. That's Uncle Nikita." I said, "No, it's not. He doesn't have hair." And it took me about an hour or two to convince me it was the man that I was used to hearing on the phone. But the second time I met him was at my grandfather's funeral. So I talked to him on the phone a lot growing up. I knew who he was, but never got to meet him much until obviously on this tour now. I love my Uncle Nikita. He's a great man.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. And do you know why you had hair during that period? I mean, I know why, but I was curious if you happen to know why.
I never asked why. I've
Why?
never inquired as to why.
Oh, okay. Well, do you mind if I let you in on something?
Sure. I'm
Well,
going
it
to go
turns
back and
out that
report to him.
yeah, basically. Well, I mean, well, basically, it had to do with the fact that your uncle Nicky, auditioned for Rocky Four, and he was up for the role of the fearsome Ivan Drago and all that. But Nikita was so big and intimidating, and Sylvester Stallone looked like a dwarf or a little tiny, like what you were saying, like a tiny ant next to him, that they couldn't well cast your uncle in there because Sylvester Stallone, it wouldn't have been believable. But he got to notice how Dolph Lundgren was wearing his hair as he thought the new Soviet style of late 1980s was to wear that strange sort of interesting haircut, and he was so inspired, Nikita, that he decided, well, I've had a shaved head for a number of years, as you've seen him, and he decided he was going to imitate what he thought, that because a lot of people in this part of the world thought, okay, that must be the fearsome new Russian, even though Nikita was a babyface, a good guy by that time, that he decided to grow his hair to resemble what he thought that modern Soviet males were at the time were sporting. So he tried it out for a while.
Wow. That
Yeah.
is actually really interesting. I'm going to go back and report that back to him and be like, I never knew this. I just thought you were some strange man.
Well, I was shocked too. I have to say, I was really shocked because I was so used to also the shaved head Nikita, obviously, like your
Yeah.
grandfather, and I mean, he was already a babyface, but when he came back in 1988, he was sporting hair, and I was like, oh my god, like what? Why? But I know he's I know he's becoming more Americanized, quote unquote, as time is going on. But he has a head of hair now. Like, what in the world happened? Much later I learned why that was, but it was a shock. I think it was a shock to the fans. It was a shock to me. It was yeah. So I mean, good for him for trying it. It was the later Nikita spotlight memories that a lot of people have of him in the AWA, and of course the latter days of. It's so interesting we're talking today because Ted Turner just passed away today, and that was the time when
Oh.
your yeah, yeah, and that's the time when your grandfather decided to pull out of the NWA, is when Ted Turner's
Mhm.
company bought it, and just as ironically as we're interviewing you, it turns out that Ted Turner passed today. So it's I couldn't help
Yeah.
but actually think of your grandfather in a way. Besides the fact that we were going to be interviewing you tonight, I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
Ted Turner gone, amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad Uncle Nikita finally shaved his head again, so I can recognize him. And a requirement for this Koloff tour is you have to have a shaved head to be a Koloff. We're taking interviews for new Koloffs, and you got to have a shaved head. So, Alan, I think you're a runner-up. Okay.
That could do. That could be. That could be. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm doing it like the late great George Carlin said. He's doing it the natural way. He doesn't need to shave it. Nature is
Yeah.
getting there. But I will say though that when Nikita came back with the shaved head again in 1991 in WCW, it was like a flashback to, of course, the old school Nikita, and of course he surprised everybody by turning heel and smashing Lex Luger over the head with the U.S. Championship. And the old Nikita was really back, not just because of the shaved head, but the one who no longer saw a reason to be a babyface anymore.
Absolutely. And it's so funny.
Sorry,
I'm collecting all these stories of how people felt about them, but to a little girl, that was just Uncle Nikita. I heard his voice on the phone. He'd say, "Hi, sweetheart," and that he's just the sweetest little man that I've ever met. He's still that way. He's one of the greatest men you'll ever meet. I don't think I'll ever see him as a heel ever.
Right, right, right. Did he did when by the time you started speaking to him, did he speak to you in the Russian accent on the phone, or he was back to his Scott Simpson American self?
Well, if I ever did hear the accent, it was because my grandfather was doing it first, and so I'm sure Uncle Nikita probably just tagged along for the gimmick at some point. I've heard the Russian accent quite a lot in the past couple of months from Uncle Vlad and Uncle Nikita. It's a common head shake moment,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. I know in this day and age it seems funny, but they were also good at it.
yeah.
So oh yeah, yeah. Actually, I'll tell you, David, if you don't mind if I interrupt with another little sidebar story.
Not at all. Not at all.
This is actually funny too. I recently learned from you know Arn Anderson, the Melody, I'm sure, or you know of
Yes.
him. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
apparently, back in the late '80s, this was around the time I think your grandfather was probably just about to be finished up in Jim Crockett Promotions, the NWA. And when Nikita would go from town to town, he pretty much wouldn't drive, but he would go with Tony Schiavone, who still is in the wrestling announcing business after a very long sabbatical. And Schiavone, of course, was the announcer in the NWA, one of the head announcers. And your Uncle Nicky would travel with Tony Schiavone, and Arn Anderson uh, pulled Tony aside one day and said, you know why you're, I should point out that Tony is very, very, very fond, even back then, of your Uncle Nicky. And and Arn Anderson pulled him aside and said, Tony, you know why you're the one driving Nikita Koloff around, don't you? And Tony said, no, I don't know. Why am I the one? I mean, I'm happy to do it, but why am I like, how do you all like see it that I was the one that was elected? And Arn said, well, it's very simple. You're the only one that likes him. The only one that could.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, this, I mean, it's hilarious. Your uncle's a wonderful man, but at this time though, because he took his character so seriously that he wouldn't even break it in front of the boys, like they were
Mhm.
all like looking at, like they didn't know what to make of him. So they were, and he would, he would never let his guard down. So even though your uncle was a wonderful man, the NWA wrestlers is a wonderful man. The wrestlers didn't know what to do with him because none of the other ones, when they were alone with each other, would continue doing their character. And
Yeah.
Nikita insisted on doing it. So Tony Schiavone was one of the only ones that loved him regardless. So Arn's like, yeah, you know why you're driving him? You're the only one that likes him. Later,
That is
everybody
funny.
fell in love with him. Yeah, and I don't mean, and again, I don't mean it in a disparaging way. Everybody went on to love your
Mhm.
uncle, but I think even your uncle would admit that, he was in a very different headspace, and he didn't really grow up like a wrestling fan, and he wasn't, he just got into the business because of Road Warrior Animal initially, his
Mhm.
buddy, and so it was, yeah. So I mean, he didn't perceive of wrestling the same way that the ones. So anyway, all this to say that even though your uncle is beloved, at this time, the whole locker room was not especially fond of him, and he'd probably laugh about it today too.
Oh,
Honestly, so
absolutely. To be a Koloff, to be hated means the world. My grandfather even kind of taught us all that philosophy. Maybe not the best philosophy for a young little girl, but especially for Uncle Nikita. The more you're hated, that means you're doing your job right. And so for
right.
Uncle Nikita, I've always heard stories of how from the second he left his house, he was the Russian heel. And he's an amazing, amazing wrestler, amazing man through and
Yeah,
through. But that means he was doing his job. That's amazing to hear.
you're right. Thank you, thank you. Hatred is the currency. I get what he meant.
Absolutely. That's what we thrive off of sometimes in this family.
Absolutely amazing. Sorry, David. Back to you.
And how do you recall your earliest talks with your grandfather about about the wrestling business?
So I had a really unique experience with that. Most granddaughters, we play Barbies with their grandpa, they pick us up from school. My thing was going into the weight room with my grandfather. We had like a little home office gym. And so most of our talks about wrestling happened when we were lifting weights. I was a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old girl, and I probably wasn't supposed to, but I was like, "Oh, I want to try that." And so we'd lift weights. He always told me I was strong like bull. That was his thing that he always told me. And so he had posters all over the walls everywhere of all of his friends that he'd collected their autographs growing up and throughout his career. And so he would tell me their names, and I learned their faces by their stories of how he met them, of his favorite matches of theirs. And so that's how I learned all of his friends growing up, a lot of the great legends. And so we talked and talked. We'd be in there for 4 or 5 hours. My grandma go knocking on the door. Y'all coming on in here? It's time for us to go. She would get so frustrated. But we would be yapping, talking about wrestling for hours and hours. And I loved hearing his stories. His stories, he had a wild imagination. And he would dumb down these stories that a little girl probably had no business hearing into some PG stories. And it was crazy. But we talked wrestling for hours while we worked out, for sure. Up until, God, probably up until he died. A couple months before he died, we would do that every week.
Wow. He was such a great promo. I'm not surprised that he had a great imagination because he.
Yes, all of that was off the hat 100% of the time.
Yeah,
It was
these are
just
the
his
days.
imagination running wild.
Right. Long before scripts were the norm in professional wrestling, of course, right?
Yes, I 100% think that's where it came from.
No, just a genius, a physical genius, a verbal genius, an intellectual genius. He was really very special, and yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
At what point did you come to understand how important your grandfather was, aside from being one of the best to ever get in the ring and do it, to wrestling history for dethroning Bruno Sammartino following an 8-year reign as the WWF World Heavyweight Champion?
I mentioned this before, but I really didn't realize much else about my grandfather other than he was my best friend until he died. So I think a lot of it started to hit me, and kind of while we've taken up this extension of the Koloff legacy. When he passed away, all these people came flooding in with their stories and their favorite memories, and I realized how many people's lives he touched. Even though we talked about, hatred is a currency in this family, how many people hated him and respected him for that. And later on, being a born-again Christian, he inspired and impacted so many people's lives. And it really was just touching, and I kind of thought of him in a different way. Maybe he wasn't just my grandfather. He was actually a really big impact in society, especially in this industry. And so it's still, to this day, collectively every day I hear more and more stories. All of my socials are open, my emails are open to where you can send me stories, and I'll spend hours scrolling and reading through all of them. And it really does help you grieve. Sometimes it makes it a little harder to grieve, but it is something I value beyond measure.
Well, that's amazing. And are you familiar with his legacy here in Canada? Besides being from here, are you familiar at all with his early wrestling legacy in Canada?
There's a Facebook group, Maple Leaf Wrestling, Pro Maple Leaf Wrestling. I've followed that for quite a while, and I'm starting to realize just how big of an impact it was up there. He really never told me much about Canada other than him as a kid, just a little boy in Canada on the farm. He made a lot of references to getting up and working on the farm growing up when it was time to do chores around the house. But that was really all I heard about his work in Canada, was his family and how much he loved them and how hard it was to leave.
Okay, yeah, understandably. Did he talk to you about being a red-headed Irish character early in his career?
Well, I don't know if he necessarily talked about it.
No, he didn't talk about it. But
he had this picture on his dresser of him as an Irishman. And so going through all of these pictures, I got to be a preteen. He would scope out people that he would want me to date if I was, back in the day. Oh, Melodie, Kara's my first name. Melodie, they're great. You do so good talking to them. They're cute. What about this one? Preteen little girl. You're like, oh yeah, he's handsome. Well, he had a picture of him on the wall. And I was like, oh, Papa, what about him? He's a cute one. And he'd go, baby, that's me. I said, no, it's not. He's got hair. The hair thing just threw me off as a kid. I don't know what it was. And so he would try to tell me little glimpses like, no, I was an Irishman before I was a Russian. I said, no, you weren't. Like, get over yourself. No, you weren't. You never looked like that. And so we'd go back and forth. But that's how I learned about the Irishman. And people would call him red. And he was like, it's because of my, what'd he say? My luscious red locks. And I said, Papa, you're bald. No, it's not your red locks that they call you red. And so it took convincing for me to understand who it was. But I wouldn't say that we talked about it.
Right. Well, there are parts of Canada for, I guess, again, if you were old enough to remember those days, I mean, this is, if you were a wrestling fan in the early 60s, you would have been a fan perhaps in Canada of Red McNulty, which was the name that your grandfather used when he first started wrestling because he trained to wrestle in Hamilton, Ontario, and at Jack Wentworth School, and Hamilton, Ontario, I would say is what would you say, David? About 10 hours away from here?
Uh,
Yeah, I think so. About 10 hours
give
or
or
so.
take, give or take, 8 to 10 hours, depending on the traffic.
Right. Right. So interestingly enough, that Jack Wentworth ran a wrestling school because that was so rare in the '60s. I mean, for there to, I mean, now they're a dime a dozen, but I mean, in the '60s to find, you couldn't just look up in the yellow pages and find a wrestling school. It was really, I don't know how. I mean, you're amazing for your grandfather to discover this because I mean, nobody had wrestling schools back then, and here's credit to the late Jack. I think he's gone. Jack Wentworth. He helped train your grandfather. He became Red McNulty, and then of course uh, in the around '63, that the same year that Bruno won the belt, that's when your grandfather transitioned to the Russian Ivan Koloff. So here's a little shout out to when he was Red McNulty. He did, of course, a great job with that too. And there's probably still some Canadians around who remember him. I remember Bret Hart had said that when Red McNulty came across, I think he was Red McNulty at this point, or maybe it was after. No, I think it was before. I think he was Red McNulty, and he wrestled for his father, Stu Hart. Later on, when he met him as Ivan Koloff, your grandfather was so determined to stay in character that he's like, no, I'm Ivan, and he's like, no, you're not. You wrestled for my dad, and your grandfather is like trying to like not lose face in front of everybody and stay. And Brett's like, no, I drove the bus. I know you. I drove the van. And your poor grandfather was like trying to save face, and because Brett recognized him, but he couldn't quite make the connection. So that story always cracked me up. But in his Canadian wrestling days, of course, he would have wrestled for Stu Hart even in the 1960s. So, I always love that story. Back to you, David.
And were you introduced to the pro wrestling locker room in? Were you introduced to the pro wrestling locker room and any other wrestlers at a young age?
All the time. I would travel with my grandparents quite a bit. I would actually get so upset if they were flying somewhere because it meant I couldn't go with them. So if it was within driving distance, sometimes if it was 8 or 9 hours, they'd want to fly. And I'm like, no, please take me with you. I want to go to Pennsylvania. I want to go wherever. So sometimes I'd convince him to drive and take me with them. But I would get so upset when I couldn't because I would love going to these shows and seeing my grandfather work. And I got to, go around the dressing room and meeting people. But it was more just like being in the office with your dad. I'd never really understood what it was. It was just like you're going to a work party with your dad. And I really enjoyed going. I like coloring underneath the table. And yeah, it was always so fun for me getting to meet all these guys. And yeah, it was just, I don't really know how else to explain what that was like other than just being with your dad when he's working.
Yeah. Did you play with other wrestlers' kids too that you remember? Or there was
I remember a few. Ricky Morton and Carrie Morton actually was at quite a few shows growing up. I don't think that we ever necessarily met or talked, but I remember my grandmother babysitting him quite a bit. He would be in his little stroller or whatever. He's not that much older than me, I don't think. And so
right.
I remember him being there, but I don't remember us interacting. I liked my Barbies and coloring books. I was pretty entertained with them after too.
You didn't have your Rock and Roll Express action figures, though?
I did not. I did not. I was more interested in the Barbies and when can we go? And I'm tired and okay, this is cool, but I'm ready to go now. I enjoyed the wrestling, but once the wrestling was over and the fan sign event started, I was done.
Gotcha. Right.
Did you feel a sense of pride early on that you had a close family member that did something very special for a living that's pretty much no one else's family members did?
I think I went through a period during like early middle school to where it was, we're starting to learn about the Cold War. And I always used him for the book reports. He would get so frustrated. Baby, I didn't do anything special. And I'm like, well, you understood it. You can help me write this book report. And so he was always my fun fact and like the get to know me. And most of the kids I went to school with kind of just knew it and it wasn't cool anymore. And so I just kind of stopped. I was like, okay. But he was so common around town. Most of the people knew who he was. Their parents knew. And it wasn't as cool anymore growing up. But he did. He wrote many book reports for me of, okay, why do people hate you? And all of my teachers loved it. They ate it up. So I always made good grades in that.
That's fantastic.
And did you yourself ever give any thought of going into the wrestling business in its performance aspect as perhaps the wrestling or managing granddaughter of the Russian Bear?
Briefly, I fell in love with business and marketing pretty early on. My grandfather and I, we mentioned his imagination earlier. Him and I would go back and forth with just business ideas. We were always making some type of invention growing up. And so, obviously, as a kid, you get to see your grandfather really beat up. He's hobbling around the kitchen. Every bone in his body's been broken numerous times. You think to yourself, there is no way I am doing that. And so, I really never had an interest in wrestling itself. There was a brief moment where I've kind of considered maybe getting into managing, but I really love being behind the scenes. I'm pretty active behind the scenes in modern wrestling. I do a lot. It's a lot of work and mental, but it's one of my passions for sure. But the performance side has never been for me.
Well, it used to be said that maybe it still is that if you become well, behind the scenes depends if a creative capacity, but getting into wrestling as an independent promoter is a surefire form of masochism that could wind you up, losing your sanity, losing money. I mean, I did it very briefly and it was grueling. I mean, it was fantastic because it was like a dream, but it was also just incredible. And I saw even former wrestlers do it, and it was not always a pretty picture. So good on you for you have a great head on your shoulders, and I'm sure obviously your family closeness and upbringing has a lot to do with it. But depending what aspect of behind the scenes you get in, it's I don't know about modern wrestling. I mean, I'm from the old school, so. But it was definitely a form of self-punishment in some ways, and a lot of people would advise against it, at least back then. I mean, maybe now it's a whole different game and a whole different world. So bravo to you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely been. I get what you mean about that insanity. It'll hit you. Um, yeah, I'm more into the marketing, and I like the behind the scenes of kind of what I do is the legacy of Ivan Koloff. I think my grandfather would want people to grow their careers, be the supporting person that believes in a person when they don't believe in themselves. That's what my grandfather represented. And so if I can be that for at least one person, and that's what continuing this legacy is about. And so being a promoter, being in promotional stuff, branding, marketing, just kind of helping people in the little extra pushes that they need. That's really what I do, and that's what I think the legacy is about.
Very inspirational. Good for you.
Thank you.
Do you have any stories about the late Al Blake from Minnesota, just like Nikita, who wrestled alongside Ivan in 1987 in the NWA as Vladimir Petrov?
No, I actually have no memories of that. I have no idea why that never came up. I have no inkling. I knew who he was growing up, but there's nothing there memory wise. I don't know if I blocked it out. I know he was a very, very influential Russian character, but I really don't have any memories myself of him.
Well, I mean, I think he was influential. I'm not sure. Like as a person, he was well liked, I think. But I mean, well, I mean, he was a shocker because I mean, here's a guy who's, I mean, physically huge. He was a professional bodybuilder. I mean, I don't know if you know the story of why he was brought in to begin with. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. Do you?
No, I actually, when I tell you there's nothing, I knew he was a person, but it wasn't until way later in life that I had watched videos of him. I really never knew much about him growing up.
Okay. Well, he came along at the best possible time in wrestling because this was early '87 when wrestling was through the roof. Everywhere it was selling out. It was at that time, it was the hottest period of wrestling since like before your grandfather started, when wrestling and television first got together. So this was the peak of like wrestling popularity. Of course, WrestleMania 3 was that year. Everything was through the roof, and the NWA and your grandfather and Nikita were doing fabulously. But of course, what had happened is that Nikita needed, quote unquote, to turn babyface because of Magnum TA's car accident in August of 1986. So when Nikita jumped the fence and turned on your grandfather Ivan and became a lover of America and the superpower partner of Dusty Rhodes, that left a void on your grandfather's side. So you had two amazingly powerful baby faces with Dusty and Nikita, and your grandfather was kind of like the Russian standing alone. So they thought maybe the solution would be to bring in another Russian. So, so one of the Minnesota guys, I guess I can't remember which one. Maybe no, it wasn't Nikita, but one of the Minnesota guys. I guess they knew Al Blake, who was a successful Minnesota bodybuilder, and I guess with a shaved head, he certainly fit the bill. Maybe his head was already shaved. I don't know, but yeah. So he came, and all of a sudden, your grandfather Ivan had a very imposing man by his side to go after his turncoat nephew Nikita, who was starting to wave the stars and stripes and turned his back on Gorbachev and turned his back on communism and was becoming as American as you could be. And Vladimir Petrov was supposed to be the answer to that. Now, unfortunately, Al Blake was a much better bodybuilder than he was a pro wrestler, and he did not learn it really well. I don't know if it's because he just didn't understand it. It was said he didn't understand a lot of the insider stuff. In the ring, he was actually kind of dangerous. He would hurt people unintentionally. He was a very nice guy, apparently, but to this day, I mean, I think even your uncle Nikita said he didn't know why either, that he disappeared quickly. It's kind of like shrouded in mystery. It wasn't really talked about, but he left just as fast as he came. But he was quite imposing because all of a sudden Nikita had a big threat on his hands and Dusty besides your grandfather Ivan. And Vladimir Petrov, I think because he was in that 1987 period, has sort of passed into cult status. If he had come along 3 years earlier or 4 years later, he probably wouldn't even be remembered much. But because it was during that hottest period possible, like that's why I pardon the expression, I mark out right away when I think of Vladimir Petrov, because I'm like, my God, like the guy was scary and imposing, but he hurt a lot of guys and it wasn't intentional. Anyway, before you knew it, for reasons unknown, he left. He never really was interviewed much or talked about it, but a few years ago he passed away, unfortunately. But he was a footnote in wrestling, and I'm sure he learned a lot from your grandfather, but I don't think he was well suited, unfortunately, for the pro wrestling business. For the bodybuilding business, that's another story. But so that was
I didn't know
Vladimir.
much about him. I think it was probably I came along in the 2000s, so my mom may have known a little more about him, but I never really heard many stories about him. Not that I can remember, anyways. I think it was just a timing thing of my grandfather retiring not far from that time, and I would be years later coming along, so I think it may have just been forgotten in the little time gap there.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it was, and I think one of the reasons that when you Vladimir Koloff, you call him your uncle. Is that the phrase you used?
Uncle Vladimir, yeah.
Uncle Vladimir. So, like a lot of people, one of the things they absolutely loved about Uncle Vladimir is that he was the complete opposite of Vladimir Petrov, because he was fantastic in the ring, and everybody not only liked him as a person, but they loved him in the ring. He was just really, really good. I mean, I guess still is, but I mean, like that's why people are like. I've heard many people say that one of the best things you can easily say about Vladimir Koloff is he was so much better than Vladimir Petrov in the ring.
Don't let him hear you say that.
Don't let him hear you say that, or I'll let him hear you say that?
Don't let him hear you say that. I'll have him for hours.
Yeah. All right. No. I won't tell him it was better than Al Blake, but you got it. We'll keep it all between us.
Yeah, my uncle Vlad, he's a beast in the ring for sure. Definitely worth, if somebody's not seen any of his matches, definitely worth going and watching him. Outstanding. Don't tell him I said it. Outstanding wrestler. Inside and out the ring, amazing human.
Absolutely. And he does have an amateur background, and so he knew what wrestling was before even, so I mean, obviously Petrov was a different story, but no, we'll keep it between us, but your Uncle Vladimir.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My phone bill thanks you.
No problem.
And when you were growing up, how was it to see your grandfather withdraw from the wrestling business and eventually pull out entirely? and how did you perceive that he saw it?
So I think you could argue that he never did leave it. I think, from my perspective, obviously he did retire, and it looks like he slowly faded out. But I think, especially here in the Carolinas, if you're anywhere near the Carolinas here locally, if anything, he was more active in the Indies once he retired. That man, up until a couple weeks before he died, was in a ring. If he could stand, he was in a ring. So maybe on a bigger scale, he did pull back quite a bit. But from my perspective, he never stopped. I never got to see him saying, I'm tired of this. It was, he lived and breathed wrestling. It was his entire life. If he could be in a ring and stand and work something, he had to. I mean, you would have to drag him out of that ring to get him out of there. He loved it. And you could tell it on his face too. As a little kid, you look up at him in the ring. I loved watching his matches because you could see passion and inspiration for what he did, even with people booing him or cheering him matter. He loved what he did, and it was inspiring to me as a kid to see that, even on a man that hobbles around his kitchen and is aching in pain on the way to the match to get up there like nothing ever happened. It's inspiring.
Yeah, definitely must be. And even hardcore wrestling fans, the ones who, I should say, not hardcore in the sense of loving wrestling, but the fans of the hardcore style can say that your grandfather was an ECW original. I mean, he competed in the early days of ECW before it was Extreme Championship Wrestling with your uncle Vlad, of course, and just. My God, like what didn't he do? I mean, he even had a bit of an impact in the '90s as well, outside of the Carolinas. So it's quite something.
Absolutely. I mean, literally until the week he died, if he could be in a ring or be near wrestling, every weekend, I think of that man's life. I don't think there was one weekend off, even if it was one of our birthdays. Our birthday party was at a wrestling match. It was just, he loved it. He breathed it. And I think that passion got passed down to all of us for maybe not just wrestling, but anything that we do. We definitely have that passion that he had for everything in life.
Amazing.
And how did you see the relationship between your grandfather and Renee, your grandmother?
He was an amazing man. You think of, especially for a young woman, you think of, that's what I want. You think of somebody that just respects women and values a relationship like that. It's definitely something like a fairy tale, for sure. He waited on her hand and foot, and he respected her it's more than just like what you would see. Oh, they're a sweet little married couple. They were the standard. They were amazing. He loved her. He showed me what love truly meant by how he loved her. And I think it's something, he inspired every bit of my family in every single way possible. Just how he stepped up and loved all of us through everything, and how he loved my grandmother was truly inspiring, for sure.
And did Nikita stay in touch a lot with your grandfather and possibly yourself after your grandfather passed away?
He did do the funeral, so I got to meet him for a second time without hair this time at the funeral. I don't remember much of that day. I think we went to a Waffle House or an IHOP. Couldn't tell you. I was not a sane human being at that moment. I just lost my best friend. But he did. He stayed in touch with my grandmother a little bit. I actually really didn't hear much from him, being the youngest Koloff, until this tour came about. He was actually the one that reached out to us and asked if we'd be interested in participating in it and being involved with it to honor my grandfather. And since then, I've had the lovely opportunity and chances to really get to talk to him some and share some stories. And it's a really full circle moment for a granddaughter to talk to my Uncle Nikita on the phone and then get to sit beside him at autograph signings and watch him do what he loves most, just like my grandfather did. So we stay pretty close now.
It was so inspirational to watch them in character, like first come in as fearsome, and then with Nikita turning babyface and your grandfather vowing vengeance, and then later when Paul Jones's assassins turned on the Russian assassins, when they turned on your grandfather and Nikita and him reunite, and they're both briefly presented there as baby faces. And it's so weird to watch your grandfather as a baby face, because even he said he didn't really have the look to be a baby face, but he was such a sympathetic character by that point that you couldn't help but cheer him. And of course, what was really happening was that the Soviet Union was coming apart, so it was a little strange for just American people to just boo Russians naturally anymore. And he tried. I mean, he's just so good. I mean, it was so touching to watch Ivan. If you were a fan and you followed week to week the NWA at that point, just to see Ivan and Nikita reunited after being bitter enemies because of Nikita's Americanization, it's really touching. Even to this day, when I watch it, it's just so well done, and everybody involved was so great. And then, like, unlike now, where like fans are kind of looking with a skeptical view because they don't believe what they're seeing or whatever, like that was just like you had to really suspend any disbelief you had, because you were taken along on an emotional ride, and that a lot speaks to the incredible work of your grandfather and your uncle Nicky. They both did such an incredible job in their characters.
Yeah, even well into when I was a kid and a teenager, growing up, we'd have people come up to our table all the time. It wasn't unnormal to have just a random person you've never met come up to your dinner table and curse out your grandfather. And he'd sit there and smile and beam with pride. And it's not normal. I know that now. I know it's not normal to have somebody cuss you out at dinner, but that meant did his job very well. And so even there's a few little matches and interviews there with him and Don Carnodle to where he's a face and he's wearing a USA headband. I used to clown him so bad. That don't even look right. You don't look right wearing a United States headband. And I would laugh and laugh and laugh at him. I said, "You can't be a face, Papa. You can't be a face." And he thought it was so funny that even his granddaughter just, I knew it didn't look right.
And thank you also for bringing up the name of Don Carnodle, because that's a name that doesn't get mentioned much by modern wrestling fans, because, as I often say on this show, WWE controls the narrative of wrestling history quite a bit now. And because Don Carnodle, outside of the North Carolina area, the Mid-Atlantic wrestling area, that he wasn't a huge name outside of there much. So he gets often sometimes forgotten. But I mean, I've even heard your grandfather say how much he respected Don Carnodle. He was so instrumental in a bunch of careers, from Sergeant Slaughter's to Barry Darsow, Crusher Khrushchev, your grandfather's to me. Your grandfather, of course, came before him, but I think your grandfather was really fond of Don Carnodle.
Oh, absolutely. I always heard very fond stories of him, and watching his matches myself, just powerhouse of a wrestler. I mean, great on the promos. Like, he was just all around. He was a good standard. It's a shame he's not talked about more.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I agree completely, for sure. Back to you, David.
All right. So, did you get to see Vladimir Koloff and your grandfather spend time together in his later years?
I did not. My mother did. He used to terrorize my mother quite a bit. When they would go to autograph signings, he would terrorize my mother. I came a long way later after, they had gone separate ways with their careers. I did not meet Uncle Vladimir until this Koloff tour, and I didn't know what I was going to make of him. My mom, she said, "Man, he used to terrorize me as a kid. I couldn't stand him. Uncle Vlad, I don't like him." So I didn't know what I was getting into. And turns out he's one of my best friends. We bully each other like there's no end. I love my Uncle Vlad. But most of my memories are getting made now, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's the best thing ever, getting to see him.
Wow. That's I wouldn't have expected. That's incredible. Good story.
And you still watch your grandfather's iconic match and promo footage to this day. What stands out to you regarding his incredible body of work?
I watch so much of his work now, maybe more than what I did when he was here. Obviously, people will send me stuff, and then I'll make videos to post on social media. Every single day of my life now, I get to see my grandfather and his work, and it's an interesting thing. Most people just mourn the death of their grandfather, and I hate to say move on, but they kind of move on. But I don't get to do that. I wouldn't have it any other way. I every single day of my life for hours is everything about my grandfather, and it's such an honor to be able to look at that. And even as far as helping other people in the indies grow using his work is something I've had a guy here lately to where we've been referencing my grandfather's matches and what he did and how he can apply it to his own work. And so seeing the little bits of the Koloff legacy in this modern industry now is really something inspiring, and I'm so honored to be a part of.
Well, that's great. And I'm guessing probably your grandfather may not have mentioned it, but were you at any time keenly aware of the estrangement between your grandfather and World Wrestling Entertainment, as it's now called?
It never really was talked about as a kid. Obviously, I think there may have been talks and rumors of some discrepancy, but my grandfather really never had any problem with anybody. I think fans and talks can take things out of hand, but there really truly was never any issue to my knowledge of what I knew or my family knows.
Right.
Extremely grateful for everything WWE has done and how they've recognized him to this day. And I think my grandfather would be very, very happy and honored to see how things have turned out.
Right. No, for sure. Yeah, maybe it's even misstated because
Mm.
it's not to suggest that your grandfather had an issue with anybody at all. In this case, it was more that because of the ego of the man running that company for so long, it's more that he had something against your grandfather rather than your grandfather having any ill will whatsoever toward them. So it was really a
Yeah.
one-sided thing.
My
Yeah.
my grandfather's theory on that was you can't control what other people think about you. So whether or not anybody did have any ill will against him was not his concern. It really wasn't that important to him what others thought of him like that. If somebody had ill will, it would have had to been on their own accord. So I really
Right.
don't have any idea what it could have been, or there was really no talks of it. You know, things happen and rumors spread, and especially with social media now and how it's grown. I think things can be blown out of proportion and misstated quite a bit. But to my knowledge, there's never been ill will by anything.
Yeah, I'm only mentioning it only because the fans loved your grandfather so much that there was a lot of fans that felt cheated that his legacy took so long to be acknowledged. It actually took for Vince McMahon to leave the company for it to be acknowledged more. That they frosted over. I mean, they've done it to others too, but there were a
Mm.
lot of fans in the '90s. And I mean, okay, he was still very active in the Carolinas, but a lot of people wanted his national legacy, international legacy, to be celebrated more. And with the Hall of Fame, for example, beginning in 1994, he was such a glaring omission. Not saying even questioning or not questioning. I'm not even necessarily validating whether that Hall of Fame is worth much or not, except in people's hearts, maybe. But there was a whole generation of fans or two that were sad because they always felt your grandfather was one of the best, and he was, and they just kind of ignored him for so long. So it was. I mean, he took it great, I guess, but to a lot of fans, it was hard to watch because, like, how could they leave out
Yeah.
Ivan Koloff? Like, so I'm
Yeah.
speaking more from the perspective of how it was for fans who loved your grandfather to
Yeah.
never see him get recognized for all those years that he was around, after the '80s when he slowed down, basically.
Yeah. My grandfather, when he was living, you know, he had stated how much of an honor it would be to be put in the Hall of Fame. And it really, I think towards the end, it really did kind of bother him that he hadn't been put in the Hall of Fame. He'd made the comment a few times of, you know, all of my friends are in there. I'd like to be recognized for what I did. But truthfully, he was not the type of person that needed the recognition, the hatred from the fans and the people cursing him out at dinner tables. He would often ask, why do they still care? And, you know, if they hated me so much, why do they still care to hate me? Or why do they shake my hand? Why do they tell their kids about me? And so I think that was honestly the recognition. And obviously, there's a divide between the fans' perspective and the family's perspective of it. I agree with the fans of he should have been recognized much sooner, but we are extremely grateful that it happened at all. We're very aware that it could have not happened. You know, we would have been completely content with that. So I think rather than saying people have done him wrong or anything like that, we're just extremely grateful that his name came up in a conversation and it was able to happen. We are extremely grateful for that.
Okay, excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear.
For those unfamiliar with Neil Koloff, what can you tell us about him?
Cousin Neil, you've got to watch his matches. If you want to see one of the best wrestlers this generation has to offer, we are extremely honored to even have a Koloff like that. He is one of the best. You will not be disappointed if you are anywhere near a Koloff match where Neil Koloff is matching or is wrestling. You got to go. It will change your life. He is the true definition of what this Koloff legacy is, and I think the people are really going to start to see that with this Koloff tour. You're not ready for Neil Koloff. It's about to change some lives for sure in the wrestling industry.
Good, because they could use changing. I love it.
This is just coming from the cousin perspective. I love watching his matches. It's something you could sit and watch for hours. He's a Koloff through and through. He's got the blood for sure.
Super. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen. Neil Koloff is coming to a town near you, perhaps.
Quite a few towns near you. Keep an eye out for that Koloff name.
Awesome.
How does the rest of your family treat or view the legacy of the Koloff name in the wrestling industry?
So earlier I mentioned it's like going with your dad to the office. Most of my family just kind of thinks of it like that. I have a sister, she's in her 20s, and she does not understand what I do. She goes, Melodie, he was just our papa. I don't understand how you can go and talk about him. Like, she used to color in his tattoo with markers and crayons, or twist his beard with little Barbie hair tools and stuff like that. That was her papa. That was her grandpa. You go fishing, you go grocery shopping. So she doesn't understand any of this whole hoopla. She really has no clue what he did. She doesn't understand it to that level because that's just her papa. Then I've got two more sisters they were just babies when he died. And so they kind of know my papa wrestled and he did a big thing. They got to go to the Hall of Fame. So they just know they walked a red carpet. They don't really know why. And my mom prefers to just keep him as her dad and keep those memories to herself of just how good of a dad he was. And she's grateful for that. But she really has no interest in anything wrestling. She likes keeping her memories very close to her. So I'm the only crazy person that does wrestling stuff with it. So.
Well, we love your crazy, so keep it up.
And how did the idea of a Koloff family reunion come about? What was the genesis of the idea?
Behind the scenes, I'm not quite sure what happened. All I know is me and my grandmother got a call and said, would you like to help us honor Ivan's legacy? And of course we said, yes, let's go. And I was previously doing some more things trying to get the legacy started. I've been doing some shows with independent promotions, trying to get some legacy shows started and get the name of Koloff back out there. And at the time, Uncle Nikita reached out and said, hey, we're doing some shows and a Koloff tour and just getting back out on the road, making new memories. And so really it was just a God thing, putting us all together at the right time. And that's really how it started. We just haven't looked back.
Amazing.
Tell us about your life from being a teenager, from up until now.
Believe it or not, I was a very quiet teenager. I didn't talk to many people. I was a music person. I love music. And so all throughout high school, I was a music person. My grandfather always said I was going to grow up to be a singer. I don't think wrestling promoter and marketer was in the running up for what he thought I was going to do. I loved wrestling, but music was my thing. My mom and my dad, they're in a gospel group. They sing every week, and that's their jobs. My girls play music, and we all love music. And so throughout high school, that's what I did was music, and I thought that was my career path. But life had other plans. And when my grandfather passed, I took up wrestling and somehow got really interested in public speaking, which no one from high school would believe that I'm this person now. So I was a quite different person back then. And I don't think I'd trade it for the world to go back to who I was.
How has the Koloff family reunion tour been going so far?
Outstanding. We have gotten to hear more stories than I ever could have possibly imagined. And the phrase that my grandfather used of why do people care? I think it's such an amazing thing from a granddaughter point of view. I don't wrestle. I just do podcasts and yap about my grandfather, but it's amazing to see all these people coming out. And obviously Uncle Nikita, people remember him, and it's amazing getting to see him interact and taking up more of that torch, like how my grandfather took it, just with that passion for wrestling and what he does, and this sincerity and humbleness for the fans and what they mean. They're the reason he had a job. And seeing him treat it like that is amazing. And seeing the fans interact with Uncle Vlad and getting to meet Cousin Neil, it's amazing getting to watch all of this come really full circle. And I think the theme for me overall is just my grandfather would be so proud. This is a chance for us to spread his legacy, and people are taking to it very well. And so hopefully the Koloff legacy doesn't just stop here.
Pretty sure it won't. And, I can't help but think, especially these days, that Nikita is really in a very special position. I mean, he certainly led a very, very interesting life. He's touched many lives for decades, and now it's kind of like a transition into this senior statesman position. I mean, he was always originally your grandfather's nephew in wrestling, but now he's like one of the only Crockett NWA originals around who really has his life together. Who you want to like? Because I mean, now okay. Ted Turner today, Jim Crockett is gone, Dusty is gone, the Road Warriors are gone, and Nikita now is like one of the last standing NWA originals. Even the original Midnight Express sadly is gone. Your grandfather, I mean, your uncle Nikita is now like slowly moving into this elder statesman, or not terribly elderly, but I mean, he's one of the. I mean, look at just where he came from. I mean,
Yeah.
if he came from that class of Minnesota. Like, there's only one or like two guys left of 12 or 13. And I think Nikita, your uncle, is well aware of it. I've heard him even say it. I think that it's hard not to notice that him and John Nord are the last two. That everybody else from that Minnesota school is gone, pretty much.
Yeah, I've never really thought of that. You really don't want to think of it that way either. I mean, I think he's got quite a few more miles in him, and I think his place in this and making an impact is not nearly just started, but it's nowhere close to being over. And I think he's taking such a lead on that so well, of being the new Ivan, essentially. He's taken up that lead of he's making his legacy and his mark, and while continuing Ivan's legacy, continuing Nikita's legacy as well, and making his own mark in the world and continuing that, pushing that to others, encouraging others. He's doing an outstanding job, and it's amazing getting to see that up close.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I meant is that he does have a long, long way to go. And we're so blessed to be able to see this because, as I said, for the NWA fans of the 1980s and stuff, like, thank God there's a Nikita Koloff to talk about it and to carry that torch. I mean, I wish there were more, but absolutely, he's doing great and he has a long, great road ahead of him. And just thank goodness. I mean, we are so grateful that he's here. I mean, even those who don't know him personally are gratified that, that, like, my goodness, you couldn't ask for a better representative of that era, and bless him. He's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're so blessed to have him be willing to even go with us and do these things with us, where we couldn't do anything we do without Uncle Nikita. He definitely helps lead quite a bit of us, keeps us all in check. We can get out of hand sometimes. I know we can, all four of us together, but he's the crucial part to this whole thing, really.
Somebody sent me to Siberia there for a moment.
Yeah, it looks like you just ventured. You ventured into parts unknown. The ghost of Ole Anderson as the Black Scorpion took you away from us.
That's right, and I think with Melodie's grandfather, they made sure I took a brief trip to Siberia there in the salt mines of Vladimir Lenin. So, no, we're so thrilled to be back after that very. It seemed brief on my end. I don't know how long it was for you, but and I was just going to say that. What was I going to say? I was going to say that. I don't remember what I was going to say. That trip really did me something. Go back to it, David. I'll think of it.
All right. When all else fails, you pivot back to David. All right. Have people been extensively sharing their memories as of late regarding your grandfather?
Yes, extensively. I've had stories that make me question if my grandfather really did that, but we mentioned his imagination. I had a guy tell me one time that he asked my grandfather to choke slam him in the middle of Walmart. And my grandfather's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And he was like, yeah, just do it. And he's like, no, son, I'm not going to do that. And so he was like, just do it. And so he was like, all right, come here. So he took him in front of the pain medication aisle and slammed him in the middle of Walmart and said, all right, go buy yourself some medicine. And so I'm like, did he really? Did he do that? But then I think again, he probably would do something like that, wouldn't he? And so I get to hear these crazy, outlandish stories. And especially, I'm not going to begin to tell you some of the ones Uncle Vladimir told me, some that I wish I could unhear. They were absolutely wild and crazy, well before he was my grandfather. So I'm like, I wish I could unhear it. But they
Yeah,
were
sure,
extensive, crazy stories. But it makes me love them even more. Just that's my papa. I'm not your
yeah.
average grandkid for sure.
No, and I think many of our grandfathers had stories from their youth that would make their grandchildren blush. I mean, you had a most unique grandfather, of
Yeah.
course. But now I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say before I took the trip to Siberia there that we are very fortunate to learn, David. Maybe you're going to mention something about it. That her uncle Nicky is actually going to pay us a visit to Montreal, which feels like almost for the first time, Montreal is getting a Koloff back, which was incredibly stunning news. Am I right, David?
Yes, absolutely. And Melody, we talked about it before we went live. At this moment, I'll give you the details as it stands. So, Slam Fest is going to be going down on Saturday, October the 3rd, 2026, at Hotel Ruby Foos. And tickets are on sale now. And if you want to purchase your tickets, please go to collectandconnect.ca. And it's going to give you an opportunity to meet wrestling legends, special guests, get some autographs, get your pictures taken. And right now, as it stands, as far as the guests are concerned, right now, as it stands, we have Barry Darso and Bill Eadie appearing as Axe and Smash of Demolition.
Yes.
And it was also confirmed that Nikita Koloff will, in fact, be there. And there was a video that was put together or that was sent to my friends that are putting this wonderful wrestling convention together. The folks at LWA Live Wrestling Auctions, none other than JF, Firestorm Leduc, and Joe McCausey. And one person that was also helpful in getting Nikita booked, believe it's the folks over at WCA Wrestling Collectible Auctions and GPW Gatineau Professional Wrestling. So our good friends Martin Villeneuve and Stéphane Gauthier.
That's fantastic. So two of Melodie's grandfather's tag team partners are going to be part of Crusher Khrushchev and Nikita Koloff are going to be at Slamfest.
That which brings me to my next point. So you're going to get Bill and Barry as Axe and Smash. Mm-hmm. However, in the afternoon, you will have Bill Eadie under a mask as the Masked Superstar. And we don't know if Barry is going to be the Repo Man or Crusher Khrushchev.
That's awesome.
And we also have the Warlord and the Barbarian, the Powers of Pain, who will be coming to Slamfest as well. More guests to be announced in the coming weeks, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we might have to get some of these other pull-offs out there.
Yeah, I think we might have to. And you know, you just brought back the great memory of your grandfather with the Powers of Pain. My goodness, he seemed to be their train. Oh my goodness, wow. What a lovely influx of memories. And you know, I was I was going to say something else interesting. I know Melody wouldn't have known this, but where it's being held, Hotel Ruby Foos has been here for so long. It was here when your grandfather was born here. It goes back to the 1930s and 40s.
Oh, wow.
So where it's being held literally goes back to the era of your grandfather's birth. So that is a coincidence, but it's that really makes me smile. It's hilarious and it's wonderful. So Ruby Foos is still standing. The Koloff family is still standing. And thanks to our friends at WCA and the LWA, well, Slamfest is still standing too.
Let's
awesome.
Get the Koloff.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's when I heard Ruby Foos. I'm like, my goodness, that goes back to like even before your grandfather was born, pretty much. Amazing,
Yeah. Yeah, we're
amazing.
gonna have to get some more Koloffs out there, make it a whole big thing.
Well, yeah, we have a huge Russian community here.
Yeah.
Hmm. It looks like Alan has gone back, has ventured back to Siberia or parts unknown, but he's back.
I tell you, I'm not allowed to mention the Russians. Something happens between Oli and your grandfather, and all of a sudden the portal opens and I get swallowed up in it. I'm sorry, I won't talk about the Soviets anymore, but Montreal, we love our Soviets, and we're so proud that your grandfather was born here. It's amazing.
You might be in the wrong interview to not talk about Russians.
I might be. I think I'm being punished now for it, so it's all right. Let's do it. Go back to David now. Our trusty David, who doesn't go to parts unknown. There he is.
Uh, what do you see as the future of the Koloff legacy?
Really just inspiring as many people as we can, sharing as many stories, making more memories. I think the foundation of the Koloff legacy lies in how many people they got to feel real things. Hatred was a real emotion, and it still is. And I think you're going to feel many more things that are very real with the Koloffs in the future. What you feel is up to you. You may hate us and you may love us. We've got some things planned that might be up to interpretation. But I definitely think the legacy of the Koloffs is something that's vastly growing faster than we can even predict. With Neil being such a great active wrestler for the community right now, he's up and coming and doing amazing things. The Koloff legacy extends much further than just wrestling in itself. And so you're going to start to see little Koloff mannerisms in the indie fields, and you're going to see it start to spread like wildfire. It's really, I think the Koloff legacy is going to be something up and coming in the next few years.
Now that's what I taught. That's what I call wildfire. No offense to Tommy Rich, but that's what we call wildfire. That's great. Did your grandfather ever get to show your grandmother where he grew up and stuff? Did your grandmother make her? I know she's American. Did she ever make her way to Canada, as far as you know?
Not that I know of, no. I think we might have some plans to go up there. Me and my sister have talked about it for years and years to just go see where he was from. But no, I don't think, to my knowledge, I don't think she's ever been up there.
Oh, okay. Well, if you and your sister come, you already got 2 built-in tour guides to show you around. So.
I will make note of that. I'll text her right after this and tell her we gotta go. Pack your bag. We'll go tomorrow.
That's right. We'll show you where your grandfather was from.
That's awesome.
Cool stuff. Back to you, David.
And one of the last things that I wanna ask before we wrap things up and put a bow on this wonderful episode and this wonderful conversation. Melodie, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to the both of us, and we hope to see you in October if you're going to be coming down with your uncle Nikita to Montreal. In fact, for Slamfest.
Yeah, we're definitely going to try to work something out.
In closing, and I know this sounds like a Chris Van Vliet type of question, but I always ask, what are some things that you are grateful for? And in closing, is there anything you would like to say to the fans out there?
See, very grateful that my grandfather was passionate enough about not just the industry, but about creating a legacy. I don't think he ever really understood he was making a legacy, but I think his passion created something for not just myself, but for everybody that he spoke to. He took time to speak to people, and he instilled work ethic in my family and passion. And that's something I'm extremely grateful for, because now I get to share it with the whole world. And so in tandem to that, to the fans, I get to say thank you for just supporting us in every step of the way. This was just a little Canadian farm boy's dream at one point in the 50s. And now here in the 2020s, his granddaughter gets to travel the world and meet amazing people and get to share it for maybe the next generation of Koloffs as well, and maybe the generation after that. You never know who's going to be the next Koloff, and really, the Koloffs is really all of us. It's the fans as well. And so I want to say thank you for being a part of our legacy.
Well, it's definitely our thrill and our pleasure, and for your grandfather, who was born during the Second World War, like you said, a small town Canadian farm boy, and And my goodness, did he see the big city and bright lights in big city? I mean, how many
Yeah.
people can say they won the World Heavyweight Championship in Madison Square Garden? Not many, but your
Not many.
grandfather could. It's incredible.
On that note, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. And if you were unable to join us, in a few moments, I will be uploading this onto YouTube. And if you haven't already, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but I feel like I have to say this every time. I've noticed quite a few of you watch the videos that we post here on the Freeform Friday YouTube channel, but you haven't subscribed or hit the notifications bell so that you get notified every single time we upload a new interview and some new content. So may I remind you, if you haven't already, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notifications bell so you get notified every single time we upload some new content.
Well, you
I
definitely,
myself,
yeah. Sorry.
go ahead. Sorry, Alan. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna encourage people to do it, because if you don't, you might find yourself being chokeslammed at Walmart by David Buchanan. So we got Walmarts here too, baby.
We
Don't
can
don't
teach some
don't
lessons.
take
It'll be bad news if you
don't
don't.
don't make me do it. There are people out there that will actually take me up on it.
He knows people now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, that's true. I mean, well, I mean, just they should watch it, because you can be a real heel. I mean, not on the level of Melodie's incredible grandfather, but you could be a real heel yourself sometimes.
Can't we all, though?
Yeah, well, you could. The inner darkness is there.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing, and you know, this is the thing about people, and this is one thing that when it goes back to the Attitude Era, which is, I know Alan is not your favorite wrestling era, and Vince Russo is not one of your favorite people, but he did say this at one time, and it's true. He says, there are shades of gray in everyone. There are people that may be bad, but will do something good, and someone who is good will at times do something bad. There are shades of gray in everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I have nothing against Vince Russo personally. I just I didn't like the era that he was. So, just not to get it confused. I mean, God bless him. Let him have a wonderful life and write wrestling that I'll never watch. So that's fine.
All right. On that note, thank you all so much for joining us. And as I said, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It does so much for all of us. I will see you back here tomorrow for a special edition of Freeform Friday Eve. And my guest will be Kieran Robertson. Who is Kieran Robertson, you may ask? He is a member of Jeff Tate, former singer of Queensryche. He is a member of his band. He is the producer and primary songwriter for the new album that Jeff Tate released, Operation Mindcrime 3, to keep up with the Operation Mindcrime conceptual story. And we're going to talk more in depth about that whole album and all things in between. And please be sure to join. Should be quite an interview, and I look forward to talking to Mr. Robertson tomorrow. And I do want to thank Jeff's wife, Susan, for proposing him as a guest, because since her husband was not available to speak to me, as he is quite extensively busy at this time, promoting and touring for the album. But that's tomorrow.
Jeff and Kieran are two highly intelligent guys, so I'm only guessing that they're Koloff fans too, because intelligent people are fans of the Koloffs. Right?
I'll be sure to ask Kieran. I'll be sure to mention that to Kieran when I interview him tomorrow.
Tell him to put down the guitar and pick up a hammer and sickle. It's time.
We can give him a chain or two.
Give him a chain or two. You must have a Russian chain without blood on it still somewhere.
Somewhere, maybe.
Somewhere. That's tomorrow, folks. Don't miss Kieran Robertson with David Buchanan. But back to our Koloff guest.
Once again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to the both of us. Thank you so much once again. Let's hopefully we can do this again sometime, and hopefully we'll see you here in Montreal in October. And we thank each and every one of you for joining us. On that note, I'm David Buchanan. He's Alan Greenberg, and she's Melodie Koloff. On behalf of all of us, take care of yourselves and each other. Love one another. Goodbye and good night.